Sweet. So, authoring immersive experiences. I put this together today just for you all. Um, just introduce myself very quickly. I'm Chris Willey. I'm now a senior lecturer in the first year program, acting area head of DSP. I formed the Immersive Media Lab in 2017, and I'm also an Adobe education leader. That last means that I'm one of like about 300 educators in the world who get together and talk about the creativity and the tools that Adobe's bringing, and it's just super fun to be in the room with a company that is putting forward the idea that creativity really is for all. That said, I also push into a lot of other technologies, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I've already kind of got into this, like the why. I always start my talks with why. Why would I do any of this stuff? Similar way that other applications have helped incorporating for designing new experiences. I think that extended reality, which is the shortcut for XR, the devices and the emerging converging technologies are just going to bring brand new ways to think about authoring and designing experiences. And that's really the crux of this talk today is finding ways to create those stories, that data with a soul. And that data with a soul comes from Brene Brown, if you've ever seen the talk Power of Vulnerability. And I found on my research, I found this future of storytelling. I'm just going to head there. It's like a 2-minute video of a company that has created this like overarching media arm, but also it talks a lot about the kind of emerging, converging technologies that I play with in the Immersive Media Lab. And so I'm just going to pull up this video real fast. And I want to make sure you all can hear it, so... So the rest of it turns into an advertisement for a conference that I'm very interested in, but the idea there that the modalities of storytelling has changed and that there are brand new opportunities, that is kind of my cue. I very much see it as my role in this big blue zoo to usher generations that are going to live outside of me into these new behaviors and make sure that they are looking at the beautiful things that arise and that we are sharing focus on the challenges and the implications of some of these technologies. And I think that has been one of the things that helps me just get, I'm going to be a little cheesy, I straight up jump out of bed in the morning when I think about getting in and sharing this stuff with people. So it's important that we're all on the same page with that. And I hope sincerely that you all can find something, whatever it is, that genuinely motivates you to be able to put energy into it, and you can handle all the BS that can come with it. I think that part of this talk, I want to outline the technology and the terminology, just so that, like I said, we can share focus, we can be on that same page. And some of these things you've heard of before, some of these things I'll be sussing out, like you've heard these words, but they are often used synonymously in culture, so we're going to like really parse them out so that we're on the same page. And then I'll finish the talk by showing you where the industry is for some of these extended reality authored experiences. And lastly, I'll show you some research from another film student who Lori introduced me to a couple years ago, and it's just growing so well in the lab. So first things first, you probably have heard of this before, LIDAR. Originally, it was a portmanteau of laser and radar, but now it's being used for light detection and ranging. And LIDAR, this is an aerial photo, but this is coming from the new iPhone 12. I think I have this as an image here. And so I'm just going to scroll down on this. You probably have seen this. If not, no big deal. But the LIDAR is this really cool thing that senses our world, and here's the little video of it. What's happening is the phone is publishing a laser, and then that laser is getting pinged back to a mirror, and the time that laser leaves the phone to the time it pings the mirror gives a depth. and that depth is then creates a point cloud when a whole bunch of lasers are spewed out. And this is a fundamental underlying thing of the technologies that I'm going to be talking about today. A lot of the stuff is currently emerging from the world of like research labs into mass adoption platforms, and the iPhone is one of those things that I would consider as a mass adoption platform. Photogrammetry is another. Hey, my computer's going a little slow today. Photogrammetry is another technology that you should be aware of. This is from a creative, Robert Kreshek. I think I'm saying his name right. But essentially, it's been around forever, and originally it was used in architecture to help. You took two photos and you measured the distance between those two photos to create an accurate measurement at scale of a building that you didn't have measurements for. And so now, though, what we're doing is we throw these images, these digital images in, and a software will pile together all of the photos to create a 3D object. And so this is what the exterior of a building would look like with photogrammetry, and each one of those little camera like square things is the picture, and it's all of those that come together to focus to create this object. And here's some internal shots. I'm going to go back the other way real fast. I'm a part of this group on Facebook called Photogrammetry, and this is what this church looks like. These are 3D images that look like photographs, but because they're three-dimensional, we as a user can literally walk around them. And I think that's an important technology to understand what's going on under the hood here. Next, we have volumetric video, and this is from Google Research, and I think it's going to go right to a specific spot here. Yeah, just to give you an idea of what this looks like. I should tell you that each one of those cameras is a 12 megapixel camera, so it's got an incredibly huge depth of pixelation, and they're also doing the depth mapping. What this means is now, instead of just taking a still photo for photogrammetry, you now take composited video for photogrammetry. And the mimesis, or the representation that's mimicking reality, we're still at the uncanny valley, but we're coming out of it, definitely. And I think in y'all's lifetime, there will be a veracity or a very high fidelity between volumetric video. And so just imagine, not being able to see somebody who's on the other side of the world, to literally just tapping the bridge of your glasses and there they are, and you're in front of them and with them. So this is all coming out of Google Research right now. And my goal is to share these technologies with you, but not to go too in depth. If any one of these things is interesting, then let's definitely talk about it more. Facebook Reality Labs is using the same exact technology to create avatars for their VR space. I just want to take a quick aside. I am totally aware of virtual reality being held in the setting of this crazy powerful company. It's not the only way to get into VR and AR and some of those other things, but it is a way. And I'm researching it, and I think that's the kind of like that little aside of, hey, there's implications here. There's real kind of civil liberty stuff that's bound up into this. That said, this is where a lot of the money, time, and energy is going and getting built. So what you're seeing here on the right side is the photo of the volumetric video that's getting captured of the avatar. So they'd already captured this, and now what they're doing is they're mapping the physiognomies of the face onto this captured video using, algorithms that are pretty fancy. We'll just say they're pinkies up algorithms. And so now with this kind of discrete technology, we really do get to a point where you can talk to somebody who's not there. There's this thing called presence that starts to establish itself, for good and bad. So that's volumetric video. Now let's get into some of the terminology. Again, y'all probably know some of this stuff, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, because especially this little trio is used quite frequently interchangeably. So I'm going to break it apart and we're going to look into each one. We have XR, which is the kind of umbrella term for extended reality. And then we have virtual reality, which is the environment is completely obscured and you, the user, is inhabiting a field of authored data. Your experience is 100% authored by something else, by someone else. Augmented reality is where there's just kind of data on top of your field of view. And so think of you're just kind of going out for a bike ride, and then you just have this little scroll of an odometer in your field of view, and it's kind of blurry until you look at it, and then it comes back. So that's augmented reality. A lot of people are familiar with it through Pokemon Go, which is kind of like a 2.5 version of augmented reality because it tries to situate things in the real world, but it's still just AR. Mixed reality is this last one. And what's happening is there's that scan, that LIDAR, photogrammetry. Well, it's not photogrammetry, it's just LIDAR. There's a LIDAR scan that tells the computer where objects are in the space, and that creates this interaction. So now it's not just the odometer that's like in front of you. Now there's a little person running right next to you, and they're like doing parkour over all of the stuff that's around you, because you're constantly sensing the environment that you're in. This is all fundamental stuff to understand where these kind of technologies are going. Virtual reality, this is the newest shiny from Facebook. The Quest 2, it's wireless, but you can plug in for a wired experience that's even more. You can even have it be hands-free, so there's no devices, so it tracks your hands. I'm going to be the first to tell you all that I don't think virtual reality as a standalone thing is where we are going. I think it is part of a range or a gradient of options that I think is very important, but right now it's too expensive, it's too difficult, it's very technologically intense, and you're really super vulnerable in VR. So there are some definite cons to this. However, I think it's incredibly important in that it can change your access to reality. We can change your relationship to time. We can change your relationship to scale. Heck, you don't even need to be in Euclidean space anymore. Like, you know, what we normally do, we can be in a seventh dimensional space and like exist in a seventh dimensional space. And that is fascinating. And so I think there's a lot of potential there. The thing that VR is really built for is to have these kind of immersive experiences. When I was a child, I would build cockpits like out of cardboard and broomsticks and things like that. Who's the Be Kind Rewind author? Michel Gondry. It was very Michel Gondry-esque in this way. I'm just going to check my internet speed here. It's going a little slow. So, you know, video games are, I think, the easiest way to start thinking about access to virtual narratives. The difference is, instead of a frame, right, that you literally stick your head into the frame. And so you're now part of the story. And while that seems cheesy, there is definitely something way different of that kind of mediated experience than playing on a frame. I've spent my fair share playing stories through a frame, but when I go in, everything's just so much more visceral and affective and real. And I think that's important. Haptics is something to consider. These are like the feedback of your devices and you know, the vibrations and sounds, and also like how you design spaces and think about what your inhabitants of the spaces that you're authoring are going to use to interact with that space. So that's one, that's virtual reality. Next we have augmented reality. You're probably familiar with this, like I said, through Pokemon Go, but in terms of creativity, there's a brand new way to kind of create and quickly author augmented reality experiences. It's called Adobe Aero. There's a beta version if you have Creative Cloud that works for your desktop. Otherwise, you need a relatively newer iPad Pro to be able to run it. But it's crazy because you have these spatialized experiences. So that's one version of it. But getting a little closer to home so that you can see, I don't know if you're familiar with Chris Milk. He was somebody who'd said that like VR is the new empathy machine, which I don't know. It definitely is a new machine, and it definitely makes you feel things, but I think it's more the presence of the people that are in that with you that create the empathy. But then it also is, if you see something violent or traumatic, it's not, let's say it's more presence than empathy. But the way that that relates to this is his company Within created this really lovely storytelling application called Wonderscope. Works on any smartphone device, and it just turns your like room into a playland that an illustrated story happens on. So I just think, that's a brand new kind of interaction with an animation that is made. And so authoring that kind of immersive experience that is kind of bringing the data to you, bringing you to the data, that is a little bit more of a different thing. And I think that's something that's worth exploring, and we do in the lab. Next. I just put this on there too. There with Pokemon Go, there's a new effort, and if any of you are level 20 trainers and beyond, you have the ability to do what's called gym scanning or portal scanning. And the whole point of this is to create essentially a live map of data using photogrammetry and LIDAR for Niantic to turn all of their gyms into these three-dimensional spaces. And I don't know, I suspect some of you had played the Pokemon thing when it first had come out, but it went away from me pretty quickly. However, I think it's really interesting that the evolution of it has turned into data collection for a company to create these maps. Another thing to think about is it's not just the photogrammetry, but now there's something that has to do with geofencing and geolocation, and we get these anchors now that are slowly getting built out by a Google project called Persistent Anchors, and you literally can have an experience that's then altered by your device, and anybody who has the device on, open, and ready can now turn walking in an alley into a game. And so I think the connection, and don't thinking about for you all this stuff is still kind of percolating up. Don't think about it linearly. Think about how this over here is going to relate to that over there. So what does LIDAR and volumetric video have in common? And how does a persistent anchor create this kind of mechanism that brings these things together into the same space? And lastly, what story do you want to tell there? And how do you want to take your inhabitant of that story through? They're no longer viewers, they're no longer audiences, they're inhabitants with you. And I think that's a different terminology. Okay, last one, mixed reality. I kind of talked about this before. This is a really disappointing technology. What hit the market? This like frog-like looking thing, you can see there's a ton of scanners on it because the whole point of this is to collect as much LIDAR data as it possibly can so that you can have these interactions. The problem is that the actual experiences you have are about the size of a stamp, and there's something called pass-through that you can see the world around you while you're inside this environment. So you're no longer as vulnerable, But the problem there is that you have this pass-through, but you also have this itty-bitty little experience, and it's just not there yet, however. And if you kind of drifted off, I want to bring you back for a second. Magic Leap, when the company first started releasing, what they put to market was a joke by comparison to what they're actually researching. What they've got is this technology that funnels light directly to your retina. And so instead of any lensing or any kind of screen, it's just straight light data that's going to your brain. Now think about that for a second. The same data that's light data, electromagnetic spectrum data that's coming into your eyes is now getting the ability to be authored and augmented and altered based on someone's intentions. And so, yes, you have these goggles on, but as we start to think about the implications of mimesis with that volumetric video, holy Toledo, people, what's real? Like, what's unreal? This is going to be an interesting thing that your generation is going to be growing into. And I think it's really important that we appreciate the implications of that. It's not here yet, but it's coming. This is user experience with pass-through using the Quest. So this is Oculus's answer for mixed reality, and it's still really janky. You'll see it's black and white. This is the hand tracking, which honestly, the hand tracking is novel. There's some cool stuff. It's not like you can really get to work with it, but yeah. Anyway, she's gonna look over and see somebody in black and white, and this is that infinite office kind of idea that you can be in a virtualized space interacting with this virtualized data, but then you can also see IRL data coming in. So it's interesting. It ain't there yet, but it's interesting. So that's that. The next thing is where are all these companies trying to go with this? This is something called LIVEMAPS, again out of Facebook Reality Labs, and it explains the connection of everything here, hopefully. It's about a minute, so we'll watch the whole thing. Alright, so that's something. I'm just going to cancel this. Let's talk about the last little modality here. This is WebXR, and the benefit of something like this is you don't need any platforms. You just need a device and an internet connection. So I guess those are two big aggregation of platforms. But an example of this is a website that immediately uses HTML and a bunch of other write-up languages to create these three-dimensional experiences. If we had virtual reality goggles, we could look around and see this in a virtual reality space without ever having to download anything, or you just click a button. And I feel very much like Lori, you'll get this. This is like the Windows 95 Netscape Navigator version of this, and it's gonna get crazy. Kevin Kelly, in his book What Technology Wants, says that the internet that we experience today is going to be laughable. We will laugh at it because what it will do is stitch us together in a way that we've never been stitched together before. And I think while that's both good and bad, I think as we're stitching ourselves together, we are poking ourselves a whole bunch with this technology, the internet in general. And if you're not sure, just jump on the stories and cultural narratives around the MAGA versus the stories and cultural narratives around President-elect Biden, and you'll see how we are poking ourselves. You're familiar with this. 360 video is something that's not new to anybody. This particular 360 video coming out of this company, I gotta go to the next page. Yeah. This is the camera that you would use for that. I thought for you all being film students, you might want, or film, your genre, whatever, you might want to know what the current best thing is. And so I did a little bit of research, and this is the current best thing. And I just thought it was kind of cool. I think there's another video. Yeah, this feels like drone footage if you ask me. But imagine, an establishing shot like that. That seemed pretty cool. Anyway, that's just a little aside there for this. But 360 also, has its problems. The thing about 360 is you're a user that's inhabiting a narrative space, but the entire story is happening with you on a like a flat plane. So think of images on a bubble, and it's projecting so it looks somewhat accurate, but there's pinches at the floor and the top that are usually they try to find neat ways around that. But that's one version of 360, and I think it has its real limitations. There's companies who are like trying to add volumetric video and 360 so that you have more stuff going on with it. The other workflow outside of just capturing video would be using something like a game engine. And this is a trailer for something that came out in, I think, 2016, 2017, 2018, something like that, of an experience that is just so cute it hurts. You're something. We don't actually know what you are, but a little bunny comes out of a cave and sniffs you, and aliens come, and it's just the cutest damn thing in the world. However, and it's totally three-dimensional, except for you can't move. You're pinned in space on this frozen lake, and that's a little weird. The other thing to consider, which we'll talk about in a bit, is that as somebody who's authoring the experience, you have to use a lot of light and sound cues to take the audience's attention, their field of view, to where the narrative happens. Because otherwise, you could be looking off towards Wilbur's at like the horizon, and the story is taking place. So now your story has to be smart enough to know that your your inhabitant isn't paying attention anymore, and like the story's got to stop, and then you got to find some way to bring the actor, like the inhabitant, back down to you. It's an interesting thing that you all get to play with if you choose that adventure. I'm gonna keep going here, skip beyond that one. So that's 360 with some three-dimensionality in it, but you're still pinned. You can't really move. And that gets us to the next thing, where now we're getting really close to video game type experiences. There's something called 6 degrees of freedom: up, down, left, right, forward, back, and then you can roll. And so with the 6 degrees of freedom, you start to have a different kind of feel with the story. This is a narrative called Age of Sail, and it's fascinating because you have agency to be able to walk around and position yourself as the viewer of this narrative anywhere you want. So now you're not pinned, and that pinning has challenges, but then when you have agency as an observer or an inhabitant of a narrative, the other challenges are, what is your parole? How far can you walk? And then if the director or the producer of the authored experience wants you to have this like cinematic moment, how do they force you? The fact is they can't. You literally will take in the story in any way that you want. So it's a lot like theater in the real or theater in the round. It's a different thing in general. I'll just play this for a second. So this is a trailer, so they've put cameras on the outside of the boat to kind of make you feel like it's a cinematic thing, but you're in the story like that. And you get all of these stories through like game engines. I downloaded that on Steam. You can get things through Oculus and HTC Vive's Viewport. So the kind of big world of games and big world of movie entertainment is slowly crashing into each other in this Venn diagram. So okay, what's under the hood here? I've put this in here. Julia Sorlikoff put together this talk called From Frame to Sphere: Storytelling in Virtual Reality as part of Stanford Media X's conference on this. And this is a couple years ago, and I just kind of skipped to where I thought this would be good for us to watch for a second. So there's nowhere to hide your boom or your lights or any of that stuff. All of that, you got to figure out brand new ways to tell this story. Hey Lori, I just saw it was 12:10. What time does this class get out? 12. Oh, good. I thought it was 12:15. Woofda. I was like, oh my goodness, I can't. Anyway, so yeah, you now when you're creating the narrative, you have to think more about theater blocking. So it's thinking about where a character is going to start, where a character is going to go, where the camera is going to be, if this is a 360 kind of production, and that's what she was really talking about. But I think a lot of this stuff can get applied to 6 Degree of Freedom and full mobility, but yeah, that's part of it. And then she goes on to talk about fields of view, like where most people are going to look. So if you have your story happening, your actual like action should be happening within a range of 94. And then you have the peripheral stuff, that anything in the 154 range that you can have like catch your audience's eye. And then the stuff that's just out of sight, out of mind, but still could be like affective cues for somebody, is at the 204 range. I think that's really important when it comes to like making this stuff. Foreground, middle ground, background changes to these blocking spheres. Think of these as cylinders rather than circles. Or actually maybe more spheres would be a better way to think about it. And this has more to do with the viewer's ability to focus on something with the current technologies, which there are some issues with that. So yeah, feel free to watch this whole thing. I'm gonna upload this whole presentation so you can go and like watch all these videos if you care, if you want. But it's up to you. But I put this together for you. So yeah, this is all the things that I was just talking about. Oh yeah, this is nice. This probable areas of interest. As you're constructing your story, seeing like this right here is going to be like the best place for, I think the ancillary would be like a medium close-up, right? That kind of shot where you can see minute actions happening within a setting pretty nicely. And so it'd be interesting to see somebody translate all of these to, or like reconcile these with our current understandings of like shot terminology. Okay, deep breath time. I'm not going to go into all of these, but what I did today, getting ready for this while healing up from my burn, was I looked at where the industry is at this. And COVID kind of screwed everything up, and it's an incredibly disappointing / tragic, horrible pandemic. There's still things happening. It's just not happening in the same way. And so I looked at Tribeca, I looked at Canne, I looked at South by Southwest, and I looked at Sundance. And I just saw what they were doing in this field. Obviously, they're still doing all the normal film kind of things. But, and you can click through on each one of these and see kind of what is going on. You can look at the projects that are currently out there. The Book of Distance really made the rounds this year in 2020. But there's just a ton of different projects that are either playing with 360 video, volumetric video, photogrammetry, 3D modeling, and game engines, and there's just all sorts of different ways to see how this world is functioning, and you can see what the current industry, well, I should say, what people were making last year to take to quote-unquote market this year. So the Cannes has the same thing. There was some interesting stuff on one of these. Maybe it was this. Yeah, I think so. The winner of the First Step award through Cannes was I'm a big spacewalk. It was this project called First Step, and you can read more about the project, and if you're interested, you can go and, I don't know. My goal was to give you things that could feed you, and if you were interested, and that one is something I'm interested in. Another thing you might notice is that people are really playing with the space that they're putting the inhabitants of the narrative in. This particular space is an air-controlled room with like sand on the floor, and there's this hyper saturation of the light, and so you can't really see that, but it creates these, like, in your glasses and your head-mounted display, there's a little rim light that would show in, and that could be part of the affective narrative. I know I showed you the None de la Peña. We are not going to watch this whole talk. I watched the talk, and I think it's really lovely. The thing is, None de la Peña should have had a better start at their career. What she relates in this talk is that she walked into a room and it was a bunch of dudes, and she said, I just simply didn't feel comfortable being in a room with a bunch of guys, so I did other things, until the truth of her story came out, which was that she wanted to tell other people's stories. She wanted to be a journalist, and she wanted to use high technologies to do that, so she did it. And to me, that is a clarion call. Black, indigenous, people of color need to be in these rooms that are creating these narratives, that are creating the technologies for algorithms to do face recognition. They need to be at the table. That is their place. And so I think, part of the Immersive Media Lab is we want to make absolutely sure that we have people who are coming in from all over campus in terms of backgrounds, so they have an academic diversity. But I'm also really interested in cultural and heritage diversity, because in order for us to understand these technologies, these new evolving behaviors, we need to have as many people, different kinds of people, looking at this stuff together so that we have a wider perspective. I'm saying that to you because I think everybody in here has the ability to welcome someone into the room, no matter who you are, no matter what you're bringing to it. God dang it, it's so important. And it's more important now than it ever has been, because these stories and the way that we tell them, they're getting written by you all, and you all belong here. You just do. And None de la Peña, in this talk, she immediately addresses that. And I think it's super important. So if you're interested in this, I would also warn you, there are some very triggering violence things that happen in here in this talk. One of the first videos she shows is police officers beating a man to death, and they do it in virtual reality. As a quick aside, because we're not just strapping televisions to our eyes, there's something more than what we understand typically in media that's happening when we see things in immersive experience. The research is stating that people's behaviors change more after enduring information that has a call to action in this medium than in any other medium in all of history. That's something, right? Like, that means to me that if I put a narrative that has a direct, strong, effective call to action into it, I have a better chance of changing your behavior because you watch this, because of this medium. Y'all, the implications of that are profound, both for the sustainable and the wildly unsustainable. The None de la Peña in this talk also goes in and starts to look at grooming and like the rape culture that's happening in Second Life. And so there's some real problems with humans. I'm here for our dreams, but my God, I hate looking at our nightmares. And I think that, that it's going to take all of us to be able to call that shit out and, get rid of it. But this is a powerful talk, and I highly recommend it. And I want to use my little itty bitty platform to put somebody who's got a much, much bigger platform and voice and presence and authority right front and center in front of your world. This is the last project that I'll talk about in the industry. It's this combination of biometric sensors and mixed reality. So it's using Magic Leap, which again, that's the stamp. But it's taking the data from a biometric sensor and feeding that live into your field of view, so you see your breath as a visualized thing. You can see your heartbeat. For me, this opens up kind of the newer modalities of having an immersive experience that you could potentially tap into. Just because we can't typically see the ultraviolet spectrum, or what's another one that magnetism? Like, we usually can't see magnetic waves, but if we can start pumping that data in, it'll change our sensors, it'll change our eyes, and so now we do see that. What does that do to your story when you can actually see the magnetism? I think that's something that's ripe for exploration. Same thing with breath. If you're inhabiting a story and you start to then see the thing that your ego libido, the thing that tends to go away when you're watching a story, is now front and center. We see our breath, we feel the affect, we see the change of our heart rate as the story goes up and goes down. I think that's fascinating. I think that's interesting. Conversely, I think it's scary, because as we see it, so too do the companies who've made the platform. It's their job to find your data and use that data and leverage that data. I wish I could just be so Pollyanna about this and say everything is hunky-dory, but y'all deserve better than that. You deserve to know that, yes, you're able to look at new things, but people are looking at you. And I should actually say, people have made machines to look at you and leverage your every flick of your eye into forming the next experience. Alrighty, so that's at Sundance, and you can look through all of the different Sundance projects. This was the first kind of full-length feature film that I saw. It's laughable. It's got real, I would say A/B list actors in it. And if you saw the POV Hardcore Henry, I would say it's that, but now in 360 video. I'm just going to play a little bit of this. It's ridiculous. Alright, so you get the gist of that. I really wonder who their target market was for this film. I don't know if you're also curious about that. I think it's grandmas on the North Shore? Anyway, yeah, so that right there, the fact that that's one of the first big blue chip offerings from any bigger studio, tells me that we definitely need more storytellers in this space. Further reading if you are curious. I found all three of these books to be informative and enjoyable, and they mostly focus on virtual reality, but I think if there's one thing I would like you to walk away from this part of the talk, is that think of virtual reality as extended reality, and think of extended reality as a gradient of possible experiences. And I think that's really important. For me, I don't think we're there yet, but I very much want to be a part of that conversation, and I want to help others who are interested find whatever it is that motivates them and be part of that conversation too. So these are all great books, and I've got links to the Goodreads on all of these when you get the presentation. Last little thing about the Immersive Media Lab, and then we'll finish up. This is Richard. Lori introduced me to Richard when we brought in a project for the Milwaukee Underground Film Festival. I think that's how we started hanging out. And Richard, this is before he was sent to Afghanistan in a deployment, and so he found that while he was doing the project with the lab, he was really excited about it, and said when I get back, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to call you up, and sure enough he did. And so Richard's been in the lab working on immersive storytelling and narratives in some form or the other since January. That's when he came back. And by the way, you can follow the Immersive Media Lab stuff. I'm not going to talk too much about the lab itself. If you're curious, we can talk more later. But I've just got some images from Richard's research over the year. He started in January. He's still currently researching in the lab. So he's got about 11 months of research under his belt. And sorry. Let's see. Yeah, am I back? Great. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. I'm back though. So I will just go full screen. I'm almost done. Thank you for all of your attention. I hope that you're finding this interesting. I love to share about it, so I could talk all day. Anyway, Richard was trying to figure out how to block, and then I showed him the Julia Sorlikoff video, and that helped. He's using an application called Unreal to create these narrative experiences, and these are some of the very first things using building blocks that come with the kits. This was the first day he had built a city and like lit it and had everything kind of up and running. And so it feels like you're building a video game, and the truth is, you kind of are. It's a game engine. It's just, where do you aim your intentions with that? He created this lovely little dinosaur experience where you could like break things, and that was like his goal was set out to like make something that people could play and break a city with, and that was just kind of fun. But then when he came back in as a SURF through the Office of Undergraduate Research this last fall, he decided that he wanted to take his favorite film, which is a Kurosawa film, and basically remediate it, move it from 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter, whatever it was shot in. Was it 35, 16, or 8? Which one was that? Maybe. Sweet. 35 millimeter film, black and white, to fully immersive, VR and 4 8K or whatever. And so these are some of the stills from it. This is in progress right now. And he's super excited because he's able to make some of these assets, but he's also able to pull assets in using photogrammetry. And he's taught himself how to use the software. I believe I've got one video of this, and this will be the last thing I show today. There you go. So I'm going to quit this. I'm going to stop recording. But I just really want to thank you all for listening, and I'm sincerely open to questions. So yeah, thank you again.